zakładamy, że po tych drugich zajęciach no to spora część tego modelu już powinna być względnie poprawnie wypełniona. Kolejne prace domowe, nie jest najlepsze określenie, ale jego się trzymajmy, też będą dotyczyć modelu. Natomiast jeżeli chodzi o McKinseyowców, którzy będą wspierać w formie takiego mentoringu czy coachingu wybrane zespoły, no to nad ich wsparciem będziemy się zastanawiać po tym, jak Państwo sukcesem zaliczycie co najmniej 2 pierwsze prace domowe Davida, czyli tą niedzielną i po poniedziałku też jest praca domowa przewidziana, nieprawdaż? Dobra. Okej, no to bez zbędnej zwłoki. Aha, czas trwania, no to pewnie mniej więcej jakieś tam 3 godziny do 20, tak? Czy chcesz wcześniej dzisiaj skończyć?
No to zauważymy, ja wiem, że muszę chyba troszkę szybciej niż w innych latach i zobaczymy jak to sposób. Ja będę po prostu pokrył pewien obszar tematyczny i jak pokryjemy, to idziemy.
Dobra. No i rozumiem, że jakąś przerwę, tak? Przynajmniej jedną musi zrobić. Zdecydowanie. Dobra. Okej, no to Panie i Panowie, to nie przeciągając, David James od własnej osoby.
Dziękuję bardzo. Więc chciałem powiedzieć, że w sumie to, co ja będę robił, jest bardziej umożliwienie Wam tak projektować biznes, ten pomysł, zmienić ten pomysł, który jest w tej chwili w Waszych głowach na początku, zmienić to powoli do czegoś, który ma liczby, tak? Jest bardziej zrozumiany i zmieni się do kategoriach zysku lub straty i też potrzebowanie pieniędzy. I to jest pewna matematyczna procedura, jest to zrobione w Excelu, jest to modelowanie biznesu i ja mam template, który jest dawany Wam, tak? Wolałbym jednak iść przez ten dokument, który chyba dostaliście i wyjaśnić te idee, które podlegają modelowaniu biznesu. Ja mogę powiedzieć w ten sposób, że ze 40-50 różnych biznesów, oprócz tego, który był zrobiony wewnątrz Cambridge Python, tak, modelowałem w ten sposób, uzyskałem finansowanie dla wielu z nich, dla wielu innych też okazało się, że to, co się wydawało pomysłodawcę być dobrym pomysłem, jednak wtedy, kiedy dochodzi do liczb, to po prostu jest coś, które nie jest czymś, który jest warto robienia. So I think I'm going to speak English mainly for you. I understand that most people will be able to follow this. I've done it in previous years in English, and this will be no exception. So basically, today we're going to look at the whole outline of what I'm going to teach and what I'm going to expect from both the people in the teams and also the Cambridge Python people that are supporting you. How many here are actually Cambridge Python people?
Staff.
Staff. They seem to be all at the back.
Yeah, that's that's how it should be.
That's how it should be. Okay, that was planned. Okay, so we have the actual idea owners, as I like to call you, at the front, and the support people at the back. And so, how many teams is each Python person looking after this year?
Well, David, approximately 4 or 5. However, each Python person has got also at least one intern.
Okay. Okay.
It's a sort of the tyrant structure.
All right. Sort of feudalism.
Well.
Okay. So I'm going to give you 2 templates. Okay. One is the stakeholder template, the other is the assumptions template. We may get on to even the sales template. So basically, what I need to tell you first is what we're doing in order, when we talk about understanding what business planning is. Yeah, what is a successful business model? What I'm interested in giving you today is a successful business model, okay? So first of all, let's define the business model. Hopefully you understand all this. A business model is a numerical and paranumerical exercise in making assumptions about the future performance of a commercial venture consisting in one or more projects. Really, the value of a business is the sum of the value of its projects. So whether you have a venture which has one project in it, or two projects, or a whole bunch of projects, you've got to be able to think of everything in terms of a project. Now, project comes from two Latin, if you like, roots. Pro means forward, yeah, forwards, like progress is moving forwards, okay? And ject, yeah, means to throw. But if you eject somebody from the meeting, you throw them out of the meeting. So project is throwing something forward, okay? What you're throwing forward is money, usually, in order to get a return of the money later, okay? So usually, when you're thinking about a business model, you're thinking about pushing money away from yourself now in order to get that money coming back to you, that cash coming back to you in the future, in an increased amount, okay? That's a project, okay? It usually starts with money going out and money coming back later, okay? So you look at the various projects you've got within the business, okay? And you make assumptions about how they're going to perform in the future, okay? So you have to collate the outworking of these assumptions in order to forecast and predefine as far as possible the behaviour and performance of those projects' vehicle. That's the business, okay? The business is the vehicle for the projects, okay? Now all of you have come up with an idea today, okay? You've presented an idea. That's an idea for a project. It could be an idea which contains several projects linked together. Some of you showed ideas which had, you know, there was this thing that was going to be for ladies to discuss their fashion, but there would also be a shop in it. So you've got two different projects within the one, yeah? At least two were included in several of your ideas that you came here. But there's going to be one vehicle, probably an SPZOO, okay, which is the simplest way of doing a business in this form, where you've got several of you that are going to be shareholders in it together, and you've also got, you know, finance coming in from business angels. They'll probably want to have a SPZOO to do it. That's the easiest way. And that's just the vehicle, really, to carry the projects. And in order to work out what's going to go on in there, you have to look at the projects. Okay? So you evaluate the value, which sounds like mashla mashlane, of the venture to various stakeholders, in particular those who provide finance. Okay? So what you have to gain from this is it's not only numbers, it's also things other than numbers. Okay? I'm concerned mainly with numbers in doing this, but when you do your case for finance, there are two parts of it. Okay? There's a set of numbers and there's a written part. Usually it starts with the written part, okay? And probably it'll be my friends at McKinsey that will give you a lot of your input for the written part of what you're going to write in that. I'm concentrating on the numbers part. Obviously the two have got to be the same, yeah? So you've got to, if you're going to produce a numerical part which has got this and that profit and loss in, this and that turnover, well, that's got to obviously agree with your written part. So what will happen first is that you're going to spend a lot of time getting the numbers right, and then you'll be able to do the written part, making sure that it agrees to the numbers that you've done. And if afterwards you change the numbers, then clearly you're going to have to change the written part as well. So far, up until this year, and I see no reason why it should be different this year, people have done the numbers and made sure that their business model agrees, that it all comes out, that it all works, and then once they've got it working, then finally they put their heads together and write the written part. Okay? Well, all I do at the end of it all is check that you've done the business model in accordance with what I'm teaching, and if you have, then I sign off on it, and then I check the written part doesn't disagree with what you've written in the numbers part, okay? Or that there's no glaring errors of principle written in the written part. As long as those things are correct, then we're okay. Okay, now this business model that we're going to make, okay, is going to become something which you're going to offer to these business angels. Okay, whether you use exactly the one I do, or whether you reconstruct it afterwards to suit the particular existing templates of somebody else, it doesn't matter. Within my template, you'll see how it all fits together. You can take the result and stick it into anybody's template. So, whichever way, once you've got that there, if that's the basis on which you achieve finance, it becomes like a contract. Okay? It becomes like the deal that you're going to do. It's the deal that you're going to do amongst yourselves, if you've got a group together that are all signed up to it and shaking hands amongst yourselves, or cut yourselves and mingle your blood, or whatever it is that you do these days in student halls. If you've all said this is what we're going to do, remember you're going to give your lives to this, not the whole of your lives, but a certain number of critical, formative years of your lives. If you succeed in this, get a business model which is going to work and get finance behind it, that means that for the next several years, at least, yeah, this is going to be your life. You can't be a business owner and an entrepreneur without actually putting in an awful lot of time and effort into it. So this is going to be the contract between your group and the finance provider, and it's also going to be the contract between yourselves as a group of 3 or 4 or 5 or however many people you've got in your group, yeah, that you've amongst yourselves are saying, yeah, we're going to try and stick to this. And then afterwards it will tell you, if you stick to this plan, how rich you're all going to be. And that's going to tell you in turn whether it's really worth doing or whether it's not worth doing. So when I say here, okay, it's so many things to say at once, but I'm going to follow this just to make sure that I don't miss anything. Yeah, the term business model and business plan are used interchangeably. A business plan, you know, that's got both the written and the numbers on. So when I talk about a business model, I'm talking about more the numbers side, whereas the plan, you've got the written part and the numbers part. But other than that, you can pretty much use them interchangeably. But I'm talking about making, in these sessions, a successful business model. And what do I mean by a successful business model? Well, the first thing about success is this, okay? The model is successful if it shows that you've been completely overly optimistic and that you're wasting your time taking it any further. That's success. That is a successful outcome of what we're going to do together. One possible successful outcome. You've got a dream to make a business. You'd like to be the masters of your own destinies and also become very rich. You all want to become the next Bill Gateses and the next Steve Jobses and the next whoever else there might be, Larry Hankman or whatever the name is of the guy in charge of YouTube. You all want to be that person, or somebody like them, or even better. But if when you put the numbers together you see, no, that's impossible, it isn't going to work out that way, it's far more likely that I fall flat on my face, and that is what it takes to make you realise that this or this won't fly, then that's a success. And every year we get people that start to do this thing and then they think, well no, my idea doesn't look as though it will be a commercial success. Okay? But if A does not apply, if that doesn't apply, then it can confirm the promoters, that means that the idea owners, in the view that the business does have good prospects, and therefore it will motivate you to pursue the project. Right now, you've got ideas, everybody's got ideas that they presented today, but the majority of you aren't sure whether they will be making a profit or a loss, because you don't really have a basis for it, okay? But if, as a result of what we do together, you can see that applying all logic that you have at your disposal, this project should work, and it should make us rich, even applying all the things that have gone into this, okay, then that's going to motivate you to actually go ahead and do it, isn't it? If you feel like doing it now, when you don't know whether it will make a profit, if what we do together proves that it will make a profit, or suggests that it could be even more profitable than you thought, then that's going to motivate you to actually go ahead and do it. And then the third thing is that the model can be used, and will be used if it's successful, as a case for finance. It will help obtain finance. And then D, you will be able to use that as a roadmap to check as you actually do the business. Okay, you might have to flex it a bit. Okay, but are we on course? Okay, this is going to be a 36-month exercise, okay, of projecting the future. 1 month after another over 36 months. Okay, it's not really normally long enough to do these things. In practice, I would do them over 5 years rather than 3 years, but it was agreed that particularly in this particular project, the Python project, that we were going to do 3-year ones. That's what was decided in year 1. We've always done 3-year ones, and the business angels want their return in 3 years. So basically, I would do it, mainly I would prefer to do it in order to be really precise over 5 years, but you're expected to do it over 3 years, 36 months. And then over those 36 months, once you're actually doing it, that's where you say, oh, well, the business plan said this, are we on track? And if we are, then you know that if the business model showed that you're going to be able to become millionaires, and you start off and everything's going nicely on track, then you think, well, this is good. I know that just let's keep going according to this plan, and it's still real. We can become millionaires. But if everything starts to go pear-shaped, as we say in English, yeah, wszystko idzie gruszkowaty. I don't know if you'd say that in Polish, but you know, if everything starts going pear-shaped, then you would have an early warning system that would show you, well, it's not going quite right. We can go out before we do ourselves any more damage. You see, it's a big thing what you're going to do now. If you're taking this seriously, I know some of you are taking it very seriously. I hope that most of you are taking it very seriously. This is something which can, usually it hasn't for participants, but can really, okay, improve their lives tremendously if they do such a project. Okay, you could become, if your idea is good, then this is something which could help you launch it, and you could become rich. Okay, but if it goes wrong, owning your own business is a great way of wasting the most important years after you've left university, okay, losing the friends that you now are sitting next to, okay, getting big debts, and losing face, and possibly ending up in a mental institution. Okay, so you don't want to do something lightly. You don't want to undertake a business venture lightly. Let me tell you, I mean, the business angels wouldn't perhaps thank me for saying this to you, but they're interested in money. Okay? They're not interested in you as the object of their pastoral care, let me put it that way. Okay? They are interested in making money. That's normal in business. So, you know, you're not going to get much pity if you produce for them something which is completely wrong, okay, or completely over-optimistic, and you manage to persuade them to go along with it and invest in it, okay, and then they say, no, 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 we're going to lose money, and they withdraw their capital, but you've lost an awful lot more, in fact. There's been some articles on LinkedIn recently. I don't know how many of you are in LinkedIn, but I'm quite active on LinkedIn. There's been some very interesting articles. People actually being quite critical of business angels, that, you know, because people say angels, yes, that means that they look after the entrepreneur. Well, it means actually that they're a little bit more willing to believe you than other people are, than the traditional bankers are. It doesn't mean to say that they're always going to be on your side. So you've got to make sure that you take care over this, okay? If you do a business plan which is overly optimistic, and then you get the finance, but you can't keep to the terms, you're going to come and hit that, okay? And you're going to have a nasty time, okay? You're going to have employed people, maybe sometimes friends of yours, and the people that you employed, when everything was looking optimistic, they think you're Mr. or Mrs. Wonderful. They think you're fantastic. You've given them this great opportunity to come in at ground level to the next big Google thing. But when you go bankrupt, if you go bankrupt, then you become Mr. Fraud, Mr. Thief. Okay? They never understand that you're doing the same things that you were doing when you were Mr. Wonderful. They just didn't work. You just become from the good guy to the bad guy, or from the good girl to the bad girl, in 6 unnoticeable seconds. So it's something to think about. If you make your business plans too optimistic, if you make your assumptions underlying them, which we're going to talk about assumptions in a minute, too optimistic, and you come crashing down, it's painful. Right? I have to deal with clients a lot of the days of my life. I've got a lot of clients, and they're in a lot of businesses. Some of them find the recession wonderful. They go, recession? What recession? We're booming. Others of them have had real problems. And some of them have had absolute pain, which you have to witness in business. Okay? And it's not pretty. And you can save yourself that by being a little bit not too optimistic at the start. On the other hand, let's imagine that you really do have a good idea. Let's imagine that your project really could be the next Facebook, the next LinkedIn, the next real big thing. The thing that will put you and your team into international fame and lots of money. And you decide not to do it just because you're afraid. And then you see somebody else did it. And they won all of that would have been yours if you had not been frightened. So what we're doing today is trying to be realistic. We're trying to hit that thing just right, so that we're not being over-optimistic. We're not going to try and persuade these business angels to give us money, even though we know in our hearts that the business isn't that good, but we'll get them to finance a few years of our lives. It doesn't work that way. Okay? We're not being over-optimistic. On the other hand, we don't want to destroy the chance for our business to work, because it really could be that we've hit on something which will really do something good, and that if we don't do it, someone else will do it and take the reward that could have been yours. So that's why we have to make this whole thing very, very careful. And I'm talking about the theory about business modelling. It's all based on assumptions. Okay? Assumptions is what it's based on. And why is it based on assumptions? It's based. Yeah,
Why it's made on assumptions?
yes. Why is business modelling based on assumptions?
Because we don't have data of the future.
Exactly, because it's all about the future. It's not about the past. Okay, and we can support assumptions by past data, but they're still assumptions. They're still assumptions that will happen in the past, and not everything will be. Not every assumption we can make will even have past data. Some do, some don't. We'll talk about that in a minute. But we're only making an assumption that they will hold good for the future. Okay? You're making assumptions. So what is an assumption? Any statement of expectation relating to any factor or event in the future. Okay? So we defined that the business model is a numerical and paranumerical exercise in making assumptions. Okay? And then so we're making a bunch of assumptions about what's going to happen. And then we turn those assumptions into real figures and put them in a profit and loss account, cash flow statement, balance sheet. So, what can assumptions be? They can be specific assumptions, or they can be very general assumptions. A general assumption might be, for example, that the Polish zloty will spend most of the next 3 years swimming quite close to 3.75 zlotys to the euro. That's an assumption which is general. Why is it general? Because it could hit different parts of different business plans in different ways. For example, you might find that you can pay both your sales price and, especially those of you that are doing not .pl businesses but more international businesses, or those of you that will need to buy stock in from abroad, you may find that you can pay both your sales price and your cost price to euros, so it's going to actually be something which will come in various parts of the business plan. What do you think the interest rate might be? That you don't exactly know where in the business plan that might hit. Obviously it will hit in the cost of borrowing if you have to borrow bank loans, but it might hit in other areas as well. It might have a knock-on effect for demand for some of you. So these are more general assumptions, whereas you can have specific assumptions being what you think this particular item that you need for the future is going to cost. So, and it may not, that specific assumption may not appear in anybody else's business plan, only one person's business plan, because it's an item which nobody else needs for their business. Okay, whereas the general assumptions are probably ones which are going to appear in most of your business plans. Researchable versus not researchable. So you can have assumptions which you can research and find out, and there are others which you just can't research. Okay, there are some people that thinking about today's ideas. Okay, well let's imagine, rather than pick out anybody's idea, because I don't want to look as I'm favouring somebody's idea or disfavouring it, let's imagine that one of you has an idea of taking sandwiches around the Warsaw offices, and perhaps you think of something like doing a website called bringmemysandwich.pl, or if it's Warsaw, bringmemysandwich.wav.pl, or if it's Poznan, then bringmemysandwichplease.poz.pl. And then if it's, nobody's laughing at my jokes today, it's not good. But please yourselves, and at the end of the day, it's quite late, I understand it. So, but, you know, for that you can look and see what sandwich delivery services already exist in the city, and what do they cost, what are they charging? So you're already researching an existing market. Okay? But if you, let's imagine that you wanted to be the first person to bring, let's say that you're in a more remote part of Poland. Is there anybody here who is in a remote part of Poland that's come here today from a remoter part of Poland? I mean, not such a big city. Where did you come from? Did you come from Ketch, was it? No. What was it? Not Niemodlin, was it? No, you weren't. No, okay. Well, last year we had some people come from Niemodlin, yeah, which is in sort of like miles from anywhere. It's not far from a polar, I shouldn't say, it's not miles from anywhere, but let's imagine that you were in Niemodlin and you wanted to be the first person to do direct sushi delivery to offices during the day. You wouldn't be able to research it because nobody's ever done it before, probably. Lots of the things which I heard today, like for example the Dr. Fish. I said I wasn't going to pick on anything, but there I go picking on the fish. It'd be difficult to research what people in Poland would be willing to pay to have a fish nibble at their feet. You can research what people in other countries have been willing to pay. You can research it by pretending to be a customer or a potential customer and going to Turkey or Lithuania or whatever those places were. Is Dr. Fish in the room? Or is he there? Oh yes, there you go, sorry. And then pretending to want to be a customer of that place, and you go and research it. You say, you go to the Turkish guy and say, how much does it cost to have a fish nibble my feet? Balık is fish in Turkish, isn't it?
Sorry?
Balık is fish in Turkish. Okay, well, you don't need to know it for the project. And he would tell you such and such an amount of Turkish lira. And then you'd have researched what it costs in Turkey. You could then make adjustments and make assumptions that, that if the average spending power of the Turkish person is this and that, and the average Polish person's spending power is this and that, then if they can charge this much in Turkey, then they'll charge this much in Poland, make allowances for the fact that in Turkey they're not allowed to show their feet anyway, so it doesn't matter, and then work out what the price would be. Sorry, I shouldn't even make that kind of joke. Basically work out what it's going to cost. Yeah, that's the sort of way in which you can try and research it. Obviously, you said Wuszczynski or something. What was the disease that these people have?
Psoriasis, I think, in English.
Sorry?
Psoriasis. It's Latin and English.
Psoriasis?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that sounds awful. Okay, never heard of psoriasis before. But I wish them all well anyway, and I hope your fish help them. But let's imagine that you presumably can research how many people in Poland have the condition. You know how many?
About 2 for 3% of people in Poland are suffering from psoriasis.
2 to 3%?
Yep.
Is it something? Is it catchy?
No.
Oh, okay, you can't catch it off somebody else then.
It's genetically based.
Genetically?
Yep.
Okay. Is it that thing where you go all blue, black on? Was it? Is it all where you get white spots on your skin or something?
Yes.
Okay. Right. Oh dear. Well, you can at least you've got a figure there of 2 to 3%. So it's presumably going to be constant. So therefore, that comes in then. What are these other ones here? Based on observable historical facts rather than speculative. In the case of the Dr. Fish project, you've got observable fact as an assumption. 2 to 3% of people in Poland have psoriasis, if I'm saying it rightly. Yeah. What isn't an observable fact is how many people in Poland would like to try and be nibbled by a fish in order to cure it. That's not observed in the past, yeah? So you've got something which is absolutely observable and therefore a strong assumption, the number of people that have psoriasis, against another assumption that you'll have to make with much more leeway when you come to it, and that is the percentage of them that might like to try the treatment. So that's based on observable historical facts. assumptions as opposed to completely speculative assumptions. Okay? Then you've got ones which are logically consequent to other assumptions versus dissonant to other assumptions. You can't make the assumption that 2 to 3% of the population have a certain disease which you think will be treated by this treatment, okay, in one assumption, and then go ahead and say in another assumption that you think 5% of the population will come along to the clinic if the clinic is for that particular disease. Okay, I know you mentioned that it was for other things too, but you've got to make it sure that you're saying the same things in all the assumptions. You don't just say one thing in one assumption and another thing in the other assumption. For example, you can't go saying that, you know, that zlotys are going to become ridiculously expensive on the one hand, and also have them offering you no interest on the other, because there are certain things called interest rate parities for exchange differences, and so a raise in one equates normally to a decrease in the other. So you've got to make sure that these things are logically consequent amongst themselves. You've got long-term assumptions, ones that you think are going to hold through for the whole 36 months of your project. Now obviously the 2 to 3% of people having genetically predisposition to psoriasis. Sorry to keep on one thing, but it's just an interesting, once I started thinking about it, it's got some interesting things which you can think about. That's obviously a long-term, yeah, that's long-term assumption you can make. You're not going to get that, you know, in a few years' time people suddenly say, oh, and by the way, now the figure's gone up to 10% of people with this genetic disability. Yeah, it just isn't going to happen because it's genetic, it's in the population, it's going to be a long-term assumption. Whereas short-term, whether people wish to have themselves nibbled by fish, that's going to be much more dictated by what they're reading in magazines. If they watch on TV, if they watch a documentary talking about how well this has gone in other countries, then they're going to be interested to try it. Yeah. And then if one day, you know, somebody comes up and starts doing articles that say, oh, it's just not fair, it doesn't work, and also the fish don't like nibbling us, and it's cruel to the fishes, and it becomes unfashionable all of a sudden, yeah? Then from one year to the next, you can have a completely different effect. So that's short-term assumption, okay? Then you've got ones which are expressible in terms of numbers versus not expressible in terms of number. Most things are actually expressible in terms of number, ladies and gentlemen. I believe that it was Isaac Newton, more than believe, I know it was Isaac Newton, who said the following. You know that you've understood something when you can express it mathematically. And if you can't express something mathematically, then you probably don't understand it as well as you think you do. I'm saying it in modern English. Whereas Isaac Newton probably would have said, when thou hast understood whereof thereunto, you know, in sort of like slightly older stuff. I mean, if anybody can actually read the Principia by Newton, I mean, apart from anything else, it's not even in English, is it?
I think it's in Latin.
Yes.
We have a copy of Isaac Newton Institute in Cambridge.
Okay, so if anybody wants to have a borrow of that over the weekend, it's an original copy signed by Isaac himself. If anybody wants to borrow it for the weekend, I'm sure they'll let you there. But, is that right?
Well, technically speaking, yes.
Okay, right. So basically, if you wanted to come along and tell me that you've made an assumption but you can't put a number on it, I'm telling you that you're probably talking about just a few things per project. For example, a non-numerical assumption would be the incidence, and I'm sorry, I'm not doing this deliberately, okay, but since we got this useful figure of 2 to 3%, I'm going to milk it for all it's worth. The incidence of genetic, because psoriasis is a genetic disease, we assume that the current incidence will not change. Okay, that is in a sense, it's not a mathematic assumption because what we're saying is something won't change. But of course, combine that with the fact that you've already put the 2 to 3 figure on it is actually a mathematical, it is actually expressible in number. What it means is that this other number won't change, and therefore you've already expressed that as a number. Okay? So in most cases, the assumptions are going to work out somehow in terms of numbers. Okay? Numbers which might be percentages of likelihoods, it might be numbers of grams, it might be numbers of days, it might be numbers of people, it might be numbers of money that they're willing to spend on something, but one way or another it all comes down to numbers. This is taking your assumptions and putting numbers on them, okay? And then there are those which have a narrow variability of returns, a narrow sigma, versus those which have a wide sigma. And of course the ones which are on the left-hand side, okay, of the above dichotomies, they tend to be narrower. These are the sides which it's better to have. The more of these you have, the better. But you have to think what you have to do in order to give yourself the most honest chance with your business plan. You've got to think, is the assumption that I'm now making, is it more specific or is it more general? Is it more researchable? Is it not researchable? If it's more researchable, you need to put the research down that you've done. The reason why you think you know the number, it's part of integrity to put that down, okay? And have I observed historical facts about it? Is it consistent with the other assumptions I've made? Is it a longer term assumption or is it just for part of the period? Have I expressed it properly in terms of number, or have I not really expressed it properly in terms of number, or considered it to be inexpressible in terms of number? If the answer of these things are yes, then the difference between the top level and the bottom level won't be very big. That means the sigma won't be very, very broad. Okay? The risk of not getting it right is not very broad. Okay? So what we need to do is try to get assumptions which are on the left-hand side of these dichotomies as much as possible. Now, the most, I say, are a critical part of any business plan. The most critical part, where it all stands or falls, is on the assumptions that you make. All right? It's pure logic then, once you've put numbers on those assumptions, that the way of putting them through into the profit and loss account and balance sheet, there should be no mistakes there. Any mistakes there should be noticeable, should be checked, and should be corrected. Okay? One of the clearest things is that the thing won't balance if you've got mistakes in there. Sometimes it will, because the double entry still works, but the things work through wrong. But hopefully we can check those so that there isn't any mistake on the turning of these numbers into the correct profit and loss account balance sheet. That should be straightforward. The hard part, where it all stands and falls, is having the assumptions right. And that means you should record them in full, okay, and present them as part of the business plan. So therefore, the assumptions that you've made, you've got to make sure that you're as upfront with the investor as possible with the assumptions that you've made. The other thing I'd like to say here is, they're your assumptions. At no point, even when I've signed off on your business plans at the end of this process, am I taking responsibility for the truth of any of your assumptions. They remain 100% the responsibility of yourselves as the idea owners, the teams. Okay? All I'm going to do is look and see whether they look reasonable to me, okay, or if they don't, that you look as though you've knowingly done them and not just blindly wandered into them. Even if I disagree with them, even if I disagree with your assumptions, they won't stop me signing off. Or stop me signing off if you don't follow the methodology and start to do things your own way, or if you don't mention the assumptions that you've made. Okay, that will stop me signing off on you. But even if I don't agree with the assumption, if I think the assumption's wrong, you know, I'm not gonna, my signature at the end doesn't mean I agree with the values you place on the assumptions, or that I think that you've made every assumption that you need to make and made it clear. Okay? My sign-off is that you followed the methodology and that you've understood the training. Okay? That's what my sign-off means. You've got to take responsibility for the assumptions, and if you make the assumptions too high, like I say, you might get cash that you're going to wish you never took. If you make them too low, you're not going to get cash, you won't be able to do your dream, and it could be that somebody else goes and does it and makes a success of it, and you just sit there going like this, kicking your own backside. So, second thing, they've got to be consistent, okay, with the mathematics of the whole business. And we put them at the start of the plan with the numerical values. How that works in the spreadsheet, I'm going to show you in a minute, alright? Where the assumption, now this is very important to see here, where the assumption is the product of other sub-assumptions, we divide the assumption down into the smallest parts and make reasonable predictions for each component part, okay? Now, why do we do this? Some people, okay, they say this, they say, all of this business planning, this predicting the future, it's all a load of old mumbo jumbo because we can't see the future anyway. So, what's he telling us about that we can predict the future? Yeah? The funny thing is, it's actually quite possible to make quite accurate business plans. But it's all down to this, how well you subdivide your assumptions. And I'll tell you why. You've heard this before, you heard this a year ago. But you at the back there, you've heard it probably 4 times, some of you. But never mind. It's the most important thing, so I'm going to say it. If I throw a dice now, okay? If I throw a dice, then who would like to gamble everything on getting the outcome of that dice correct to within 3% of the answer? Or to within 1%?
That doesn't make sense, actually.
It doesn't make sense. Why doesn't it make sense?
Because if you roll a dice, it has 6 sides.
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I have 1 prediction.
Yes, you have one.
So the minimum difference is 16%.
Yes.
So there is no...
But the question asks is who would like to do it? And so therefore your answer would be, since it doesn't make sense, you assume nobody would do it. Is that right? So so therefore, since you correctly observe that it would be senseless to make that gamble, okay, it means you have to get it right, yeah? It means you have to get, if I throw the dice once, I have to get it right, and I've got a 1 in 6 chance of getting it right. It's either going to be 1, it's either going to be 2, or 3, or 4, or 5, or 6. So I've got 6 options of getting it right. I'm talking about Vegas dice properly weighted so that they give you an absolutely equal chance of coming down the same. So don't start thinking about the fact that it's not even. I'm not talking about that kind of dice. Okay? You've got a 1 in 6 chance of getting it right, so therefore you'd only make that bet if you could afford it, and if what you had to win was more than 6 times what you had to lose, and you could afford the downside of losing. But if I asked you to make a big gamble, so that you'd lose everything, and what you had to lose wasn't, you know, anything near as bad as the downside, you certainly wouldn't stake anything on answering the, if I throw the dice once, what will it be? Because any of those answers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6, could be correct. What if I ask you to tell me the average throw from 10 dice throws? And get it right to within 1%. You probably still wouldn't do it. If I said, tell me the average of 10 dice throws and get me there within 10%, you might be more confident about it. Yeah? Because after all, if you've got Vegas dice and you're going to throw it down 10 times, then it starts to narrow an awful lot around 3.5, doesn't it? It can't be exactly 3.5 because I've thrown it 10 times. Well, it can actually, can't it? I could have It can be 3.5, of course. But let's imagine that I throw the Vegas dice 100 times, then I'm really going to have a sharp spike around 3.5, aren't I? And if it's 1,000,000 times, and I know they're Vegas dice, I know they're going to work as they're supposed to work, and somebody says to me, I'm going to throw these dice 1,000,000 times, or even just 1,000 times, and what are you going to bet that the outcome is going to be within, say, 3% of 3.5? You're going to say yes. Yeah? You're nodding, so that's good. So you see where I'm getting at. By throwing the dice many times, when I know what the average outcome will be, I can predict. I cannot predict reliably the future if the future is made of one dice throw. But I can absolutely reliably predict the future where the future is made of 1,000 dice throws or 1,000,000 dice throws. Yeah? That's the key to this, okay, to getting it right. By taking those assumptions and paring them down as small as they will go, okay, we give ourselves more throws of the dice. Each assumption, each time we put a line on the assumptions template, that's a throw of the dice. We can get it, if it was the only assumption we made, we've got a very small chance of getting it right. But if we give ourselves hundreds, we've got a much higher chance of getting it right, because if we might get one ridiculously low, the other ridiculously high, and they counteract. Okay? And at the end, within that, getting to 3.5 on our assumption that 1,000 throws of the Vegas dice will be 3.5. On the way to getting to that 3.5, I've made an awful lot of 1s and 6s, which are nowhere near 3.5. Okay? But I've found that in the total, my average is bang on 3.5. Plus or minus a much smaller figure than the allowable leeway. And that's why you need to make those assumptions as small as you can. You divide them up over time, you divide them by particular parts of the products that you're looking at. Divide them down, okay, so that you've got the biggest chance of giving yourself more dice throws. Yeah?
May I ask a question?
Of course.
Dice rolls are independent, and our assumptions will be interrelated. Does it matter?
Well, I mean, there is a degree to which the image that I just used isn't specifically true, okay, because you very correctly say that dice throws are all independent. What happens on one dice throw completely doesn't prejudice what happens on the next dice throw, whereas what you make as one assumption can prejudice what happens to a degree on the other assumption. Obviously, the more assumptions you make, it's not as true as the image I just gave you of the dice throw, okay? On the image, I'm just trying to make you understand the reason for making a lot of assumptions, okay? To a degree, it is less true than for the dice throw, because of the fact that you say that the assumptions can be interrelated. Some of the assumptions are interrelated. And that's why it's not as true as it is for the dice throw. But I'm trying to explain to you with an image, okay, why it is that by making a lot of assumptions, you are giving yourselves more chance to predict something which is really going to be accurate. Okay? But I'm not suggesting that it's an exact map in terms of what's really going on in mathematical terms, making the assumptions and rolling dice. Okay? So, we also should make sure that we state the research if we say that the assumptions of the research. If we're not sure of something, we should be honest about it. If we're not sure that, or if the research we did was not possible, we couldn't research something, or that we took a figure down from the air, then in our business models we ought to say so. And the way that I do these models, which regardless of what your business angels think, I still maintain is the best in the business, and you'll see why. Okay, there's actually, that's built in to this, what you're going to allow them to be able to tweak. Okay, you'll see this shortly. And then you've got to, what's actually in the business plan, the profit and loss account, etc. of the business plan, it's got to all link off the assumptions. I don't want any figures in any of those other sheets that don't link off the assumption spreadsheet. And you'll see why. Okay? So the business model is fed with numbers which actually come first of all into the assumption spreadsheet. So therefore we're going to look at the assumptions template early, that means in a minute, and you're going to have to start working on that for your homework, and you're going to have to make sure that you don't put a figure in that business plan that doesn't feed off that spreadsheet. Okay? So you've got assumptions of both macroeconomic and microeconomic. Where we're talking about macroeconomic things, it's good if you use the group, and of course we've got the Google beta group, which was one of my inventions from 4 years ago. Now this is the fourth time we've got a Google group for the project. Please discuss things there so that amongst yourselves you've got macroeconomic assumptions which are similar. It would be silly to go to the business angels with macroeconomic assumptions which are completely one way in one person's plan and completely the other way in another person's plan. It's going to give them a very mixed message. Maybe McKinsey's will help you with some of those areas too. So the assumptions reflect things which we'll be able to control as future managers. We'll also have things in there that we as future managers won't really be able to control because they're macroeconomic things that we can't. You're not going to be able to control the price of the euro to the zloty. If you could, then you probably wouldn't be sitting here in this room, unless it was just to tease me. So I'm going to probably skip through this next bit quite quickly so that I can get on nice and fast and show you the assumptions template. But basically this is what we've got coming up over the next few sessions. We're going to look at the stakeholder profile, and that's going to be something which you're going to be able to do over the weekend. Look at the market template, and maybe the sales and sales cycles template. That'll probably be the total of what you get for this weekend to do. It probably won't be possible for you to come up with a final version, but it's going to be a tentative initial version that you put in, with more research to do later before we meet in a few weeks' time. I probably won't get onto the costs of production. Maybe I'll do that on Monday, and fixed assets and things like that. I'll probably do that one on Monday. Okay, so that gives you, anyway, you've all got this thing and you'll be able to see what we've got coming up ahead for the rest of the sessions. Right, now I want to close this down, okay, and open that. You've all had this, yeah? I want you, maybe let's just take it from the extreme left. What you have to do at the weekend, okay, maybe I should write this here, and it's not going to be the whole of everything, because I'll write more in a minute. Hang on, that's not the right pen, is it? Homework. Okay. That's the weekend homework. And the Czechs would call it weekendové domácí úkol. That's the good thing. If you can't get Polish people laughing with jokes, at least you can always get Polish people laughing by people speaking Czech. I don't know why that is, but
Does the Czech people laugh when you speak Polish?
they cry. Sorry. Depends on whether they come from Cheshire or not. Sorry, that's a bit. Sorry about that. But project ID card. So basically, what I want you to do is put your project name in there. Say what the business will be selling. There's a draw-down list. If I can show you here, the mouse is a little bit not like my mouse, but nevertheless, whether it's